This story will leave you speechless. She was 73, walking home with nothing but a grocery bag in one hand and a receipt in the other. But to the cops who pulled up, she looked like a threat, and in seconds, everything changed forever. Where in the world are you watching from? Drop your country in the comments. And while you're here, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more real powerful stories that need to be heard. Because what happens next will shock you. It was a warm Saturday morning in Shreveport, Louisiana. The streets of Lincoln Heights were unusually quiet, with most of the neighbors enjoying their front porch breeze. One of them was Martha Collins, a 76-year-old widow known for her floral aprons, her sweet potato pie, and her tireless care for the neighborhood children. Everyone called her Mama Martha. That morning, Mama Martha was walking slowly to her local corner store with her floral tote in hand. She wore her usual straw hat, her old navy sweater even though it was hot, and her sensible brown sandals. She was humming a hymn under her breath, "I Won't Complain," like she always did when her knees hurt. She was just 10 steps away from the shop when 2 Shreveport police cruisers screeched to a stop in front of her. "Step away from the area now," one officer barked, his voice cutting through the morning calm like a razor. Mama Martha, startled, froze in place. She looked around. "There must be some mistake," she said, gently, her voice cracked with age. But the officers were already out of the car. There were 3 of them, all white, all tense, all shouting. The one in front had his hand on his holster. Another was already unclicking something from his vest. A shop clerk from across the street called out, "She didn't do anything. That's Mama Martha." But they weren't listening. "Hands where I can see them," the lead cop shouted. Mama Martha raised her hands, her tote bag slipping from her wrist. A small bag of apples tumbled out and rolled onto the sidewalk. The sound of a sudden siren nearby distracted the officers for a brief second, and that was when something in their eyes shifted. The lead officer stepped forward, reaching aggressively for her wrist. I'm not resisting," she whispered. Behind them, someone shouted again, "She's 76, man. She just buys bread and milk every morning." But the third cop, twitchy, young, suddenly drew his gun, and in one horrifying second, a loud bang echoed through the street. Mama Martha fell. There was a second of silence, then chaos. The neighbor across the street screamed. The store owner dropped what he was holding. Children in the nearby yard ran indoors. The street felt like it had cracked in half. The police looked stunned, but none more than Officer Jacobs, the one who had fired. His gun was still smoking, trembling in his hands. "Oh my God," the second cop muttered. She had something in her hand," Jacobs mumbled. "No, she didn't," came a scream from a woman running down the street. That woman was Vanessa Brown, Martha's neighbor and closest friend. She dropped to her knees beside Mama Martha's motionless body. "She was getting groceries. What's wrong with you people?" At that moment, as Vanessa cried and shouted, a black SUV sped around the corner. It came to a screeching halt. The driver's door flew open, and out stepped a tall man in full military dress uniform. Sergeant Major Elijah Collins, Martha's only son, decorated war hero, Delta Force legend, combat strategist, a man who had survived the worst hells overseas and built a name that echoed in the military world like thunder. And he had arrived just 5 seconds too late. "Elijah," Vanessa screamed. "They shot her." Elijah didn't move at first. He just stared. The calm that settled on his face was the kind of calm that came right before a volcano erupted. The officers turned, slowly. One of them took a small step back. "You, sir, please stand back," the second officer said, fumbling with authority. Elijah looked at his mother, then at the gun, then at the face of the officer who had fired. "I said stand," but the officer's words were cut short when Elijah stepped forward. Slowly, deliberately, like a predator stalking a target. His boots echoed heavily on the pavement. "Which one of you," his voice was dangerously low, "shot my mother?" Officer Jacobs took another step back. She reached for something," he said again, but this time even shakier. Elijah's fists clenched, but he didn't lash out. Not yet. From behind him a crowd was gathering. Phones were out. People were recording. Someone whispered, "That's her son. That's the guy from the newspaper, the one who rescued that kidnapped diplomat last year." "Delta Force," another said. Elijah leaned forward, looking straight into Officer Jacobs' trembling eyes. "I've faced armed men in Kandahar, Baghdad, and Somalia," he said slowly. "And not once did I ever shoot a woman carrying groceries." The street had grown completely silent again. Even the breeze seemed to pause. Officer Jacobs stammered, "Sir, please, we can sort this." But before he could finish, another officer's radio squawked. Backup had been called. 2 more patrol cars pulled up. A sergeant stepped out, realizing instantly that something had gone wrong. Vanessa stood beside Elijah now, sobbing. "They killed her, Eli," she said. They just killed her. And then, Elijah did something that made everyone freeze. He knelt beside his mother, lifted her hand gently, and placed a small silver cross, the one he wore during deployment, into her palm. "Rest now, Mama," he whispered, eyes burning with fire and pain. "They're going to pay for this." The sound of sirens faded into the distance as the crowd grew thicker. People whispered, recorded, and some stood in silent protest, arms folded, tears in their eyes. The officers on the scene were now outnumbered by the eyes on them, eyes filled with rage, fear, and disbelief. Sergeant Major Elijah Collins rose slowly from his mother's side. His face was composed, but his body was coiled like a spring. Every muscle under his uniform was tensed with years of discipline. He turned toward the police sergeant who had just arrived. "You're in charge?" Elijah asked coldly. "Yes," the man said, trying to stand firm. "Sergeant Hayes, this is an active scene. I need you to step back." "She's my mother," Elijah interrupted. "This is no longer just your scene." Hayes hesitated. He recognized the name, Collins. His commanding officer in Afghanistan had once mentioned Elijah Collins like he was a myth. Meanwhile, Officer Jacobs had backed away toward his patrol car, visibly shaken. He was shaking so badly his hands couldn't even open the door properly. Elijah stepped toward him. "You were the one," he said, voice steady, deadly calm. "You pulled the trigger." Jacobs looked up, sweat trickling down his face. "I didn't. I thought she was reaching." "Stop talking," Elijah snapped. "Don't insult her memory by justifying your fear." He turned back to Sergeant Hayes. "I want body cam footage. Now." Hayes paused. "We'll need a warrant for internal review. She was murdered in front of witnesses. Your cameras captured it. That's not internal. That's public." Vanessa stepped forward, still holding her phone, still recording. "You really want this to hit the internet before the footage comes out? Because I'll upload it right now if I don't see some accountability." That changed everything. Hayes motioned to a tech officer. "Download everything, secure the footage, and take Officer Jacobs into temporary custody for questioning." Jacobs' head snapped up. "Wait, what?" "Do it," Hayes said, stern now. "You discharged your weapon on an unarmed civilian. We need to contain this before it explodes." Elijah turned to the crowd. "Everyone who saw this, don't delete anything. Don't let them spin the story. They shot an elderly woman carrying a tote bag." From across the crowd, an older man shouted. "Her name was Mama Martha. Say her name." A woman near the back echoed, and suddenly, the crowd began to chant, one voice after the other, "Mama Martha, Mama Martha, Mama Martha." Elijah stood silently for a moment, hands behind his back until the ambulance finally arrived. They didn't rush. They didn't panic. The paramedics had seen enough to know the outcome already. They covered Martha's body gently with a white sheet. Elijah walked over and stopped them before they lifted her. He took the silver cross from her hand and kissed her forehead. "I told you I'd always protect you," he whispered. "I'm sorry I was late." A journalist from the local news channel was already trying to push through the crowd. Sir, were you aware of what happened before arriving? Can you confirm your identity?" Elijah didn't answer. He looked at the cameras and the people. "What they did here," he said calmly, "is part of something bigger. You're not going to sweep this one under the rug. They took someone who spent her life feeding this community, someone who raised a son to fight for this country, and in return, this country shot her down like she didn't matter." He turned his back to the reporters and headed toward his SUV. As he opened the door, Sergeant Hayes approached. "There's going to be an investigation," Hayes said. "Full internal review." "No," Elijah said. "There's going to be federal involvement." Hayes frowned. "We can handle this in-house." Elijah looked over his shoulder. "I'm calling someone. You'll hear from them within the hour." Then he drove off, the SUV disappearing into the distance. Fort Bragg, North Carolina, 2 hours later. Inside a high-security military base, Elijah stepped into a war room full of brass, decorated officers, colonels, and a few generals. Some stood when he walked in. Others simply looked up, knowing who he was. "What happened, Collins?" asked General Harper, a longtime friend and mentor. Elijah laid his mother's silver cross on the center table. "She was gunned down this morning, by local police, in her own neighborhood." A long silence, then a few murmurs. "Have they made a statement?" one asked. "They will," Elijah said, "but I'm not waiting for them to control the narrative. I want this investigated now. I want the DOJ on it. I want civil rights attorneys on standby. And I want them to know they didn't just shoot a grandmother. They shot the mother of a man this country trained to be a weapon." Another officer leaned forward. "Do you want us to take official action?" "No," Elijah said. "Not yet. I want this to go through the system. But if they try to cover it up." He didn't finish the sentence. Everyone in the room understood what wasn't said. Harper nodded. We'll put you in touch with every legal and federal contact we have. Back in Shreveport, the footage had already gone viral. Hashtags were trending. Mama Martha, say her name, justice for Martha. Officer Jacobs was being transported to a private holding cell. His face was pale, ghost-like. He had barely spoken since being taken in, and in the station's surveillance room, one of the technicians played the footage over and over again. There was no weapon in Martha's hand, no sudden move, just her voice, calm and confused, saying, "I'm not resisting." The city was about to erupt, but they had no idea what was coming next. Shreveport, Louisiana, 7:42 p.m. The sun dipped low, casting long amber shadows across the neighborhood where Mama Martha had fallen just hours ago. A makeshift memorial had already begun to form. Teddy bears, candles, and handwritten notes spilled over the sidewalk. The crowd hadn't left. It had only grown. Word had spread. News stations set up vans. Civil rights organizations sent representatives. Veterans showed up with badges on their jackets, silently saluting the taped-off scene. Even local pastors and community leaders gathered in prayer circles, arms locked, voices trembling with grief and fury. But while the community grieved, Elijah Collins moved with purpose. He wasn't in uniform now. He wore a dark gray shirt, black tactical pants and boots, plain clothes that made him invisible in a crowd, but still radiated command. He walked into a private office downtown, where a federal liaison awaited him. "Mr. Collins," said the man, extending a hand. "James Whitmore, Department of Justice." Elijah didn't shake it. He sat down and placed a hard drive on the desk. "That's the full uncut footage, body cam, civilian footage, security camera from the gas station across the street. Everything." Whitmore picked it up carefully. "You compiled all of this today. I didn't come to play politics. I came to bury my mother, and those who tried to bury the truth with her." Whitmore sighed. "I've seen the news. This case has already hit Washington, but I need to be honest with you. Once we open this investigation, the pressure is going to be brutal. They're going to dig into your service record, your mother's past, try to smear your family. Let them try," Elijah said coldly. "I've stared down warlords with RPGs in their hands. A few bureaucrats with Twitter accounts don't scare me." Whitmore nodded. "Then let's get started." Later that night, at the police department, tension simmered like a pressure cooker. Officers walked on eggshells. The phones wouldn't stop ringing. Protesters chanted outside the gate, and inside, Officer Jacobs sat in a windowless room, alone, handcuffed, pale, sweating. He rocked back and forth, muttering under his breath. The door opened, and a lawyer in a wrinkled suit stepped in. "They're making you the fall guy," the lawyer said flatly. Jacob's head snapped up. "No, I was following protocol." She moved fast. "I thought, doesn't matter what you thought, they've already pulled your patrol history. Too many complaints, too many routine stops targeting black drivers." The lawyer tossed a stack of paper on the table. "The media's not waiting for the investigation. You're going viral." Jacobs grabbed the papers. His hands trembled as he saw headlines. "Black grandma killed by police. Community outraged. Veteran's mother gunned down in broad daylight. Delta Force hero demands justice." He muttered, "I didn't know who she was." "Doesn't matter," the lawyer said again. "You shot an unarmed woman. Period." Just then the door opened again. Sergeant Hayes entered, flanked by two internal affairs agents. "Officer Jacobs," Hayes said, not making eye contact. "You're being suspended pending full investigation." "But," Jacobs started, then stopped. His voice cracked. This wasn't supposed to happen. Hayes didn't respond. He simply turned and left. The two IA agents cuffed Jacobs properly and escorted him out. Meanwhile, across town, Elijah walked the streets alone, hoodie pulled low, head down. He wasn't hiding. He was observing, watching the city respond. He passed 3 teenage boys standing near a bus stop, arguing quietly. "Man, you see that video?" one said. "They just shot her. She didn't even flinch." "Did you see the son?" the second added. "Dude's a freaking ghost soldier or something. Delta Force or SEAL, I don't even know." The third boy looked up. "I saw him at the scene. You think he's gonna let this go?" Elijah kept walking, a quiet fire in his chest. They were right. He wasn't going to let this go. Washington, D.C. The next morning, in a private military meeting room, Elijah appeared via secure video call. Several high-ranking officers from different branches joined the feed. General Harper opened the call. "Collins, we've read the report. We saw the footage. The public's turning fast. But the department down there is locking up. Lawyers, unions, politicians." Elijah interrupted. "We're not waiting on the politics to solve this. I need 2 things, visibility and credibility." "Explain," one general said. "I'm making a statement, press, national coverage, and I need a full display of support. Not from activists, from us, former and active duty. Harper frowned. You want soldiers standing behind you. I want the nation to see this wasn't just a tragedy. It was an insult to every person who's ever fought in a uniform, and then watched their family get treated like criminals. The generals nodded. You'll have it. That evening downtown Shreveport, a massive crowd had gathered. Protest signs, candles, and drums echoed through the streets. But this wasn't just a protest. It was a formation. 1 block away from the police station, a group of over 100 men and women in uniform, veterans, medics, former Marines, Navy and Army, stood silently in rows. Some held signs, others held framed photos of loved ones, and in the center of them all Elijah stood behind a podium. Media swarmed the scene. He adjusted the mic. My name is Sergeant Major Elijah Collins, retired. My mother's name was Martha Louise Collins. She was unarmed. She was peaceful. She was murdered. He paused. Silence. They didn't ask her name. They didn't check her ID. They assumed because of her skin color and age, she was a threat. She spent her life feeding the same community that called her suspicious. And now she's gone. The crowd murmured. A few sobs. Camera flashes. But I'm not here to ask for justice. I'm here to demand it. He stepped aside, and behind him the screen lit up, playing the uncut footage. The entire world watched it with no edits, no excuses, and no spin. Elijah crossed his arms. The bomb had dropped. The air in downtown Shreveport buzzed like a live wire. After Elijah's speech and the explosive release of the uncut footage, something shifted, not just in the city, but across the country. Within minutes, the video went viral. News outlets that had hesitated before now ran headlines. Delta Force hero demands justice for slain mother. Unarmed elderly black woman shot. Entire incident caught on multiple cameras. Police cover-up crumbling under pressure. By midnight, the video had been viewed over 18 million times, but while the public burned with outrage, Elijah worked behind the scenes, because he knew better than most that outrage alone doesn't deliver justice. Strategy does. Monday, 9:12 a.m., Federal Courthouse. A team of civil rights attorneys flanked Elijah as they walked into the courtroom. Cameras flashed, reporters yelled, but Elijah kept his gaze steady. They were filing a federal civil lawsuit, not just against the officers, but against the entire precinct, for systemic negligence, wrongful death, and racial profiling. Inside the court, Judge Linda Garrow, a firm but fair black woman in her early 60s, reviewed the filing. Her eyes paused on the exhibits list. Rundar. Exhibit A, gas station surveillance footage. Exhibit B, dashcam footage, Officer Jacobs' vehicle. Exhibit D, body cam recordings. Exhibit E, Elijah's testimony and military record. Judge Garrow glanced up at Elijah. I don't see you here for money. I'm here to make sure no one's mother gets gunned down again while holding a bag of groceries. She nodded once. Case accepted. Court date set for 30 days. But I'm allowing preliminary discovery immediately. The room stirred. That wasn't standard. She was sending a message. Justice was going to move, and fast. Tuesday, 3:04 p.m., Internal Affairs Office. Inside the police department, the walls were collapsing from within. Sajid Hayes stood at the center of a confidential IA review, facing pressure from the mayor, city council, and now, the Department of Justice. Detective Marlowe threw down a thick file. Look at this. Jacobs had 5 previous complaints, all involving excessive force against black or Latino civilians. 2 involved elderly individuals. Hayes rubbed his forehead. How did this never get escalated? Buried. The union protected him. The chief ignored warnings. Where's the chief now? On medical leave. Disappeared the night the footage dropped. Hayes looked up sharply. So we're the ones left holding the grenade. Marlowe didn't flinch. Maybe it's time we finally let it go off. Across the country, online and on the ground. Elijah's story sparked something far beyond Shreveport. In Atlanta, a group of black veterans held a silent march. In Oakland, a mural of Martha Collins appeared overnight, painted across an entire alley wall. A peaceful face, eyes closed with the words, I fed you, you feared me. TikTok was flooded with videos of ex-service members recounting similar stories of being disrespected in civilian life. One man broke down as he said, I wore that flag for 20 years. My mama wears pain every day because of it. Celebrities reposted the footage. Activists launched petitions. Donations to the Collins Legal Fund hit $1.2 million in 2 days. The mayor of Shreveport called for calm, but no one was calming down, not until accountability hit harder than bullets ever could. Thursday, 7:47 p.m., Elijah's apartment. Elijah sat in silence at his mother's old piano, the same one she used to play every Sunday after church. He pressed one key softly, F minor. The note lingered like a sigh in the empty room. His phone buzzed. Whitmore. Elijah. DOJ just confirmed. Criminal charges are being filed. Officer Jacobs and his partner both being indicted. Elijah let out a slow breath. Thank you. But that's not all, Whitmore added. There's going to be a federal review of the entire precinct. Your lawsuit pushed it through. You just cracked the system open. Elijah hung up and stared at his reflection in the piano lid. His eyes were tired but focused. He knew this wasn't the end. It was just the beginning of something much bigger. That night, news studio interview. A major national news anchor sat across from Elijah on live television. You've become a symbol in just days. Former Delta Force, decorated, and now, the son of a woman taken by police violence. What's your message to America tonight? Elijah looked directly into the camera. My mother wasn't famous. She didn't ask for a spotlight. She just wanted to make it home with her groceries. And she deserved that. He leaned forward, voice calm but heavy. This isn't just about one cop or one city. It's about a pattern, and it ends when people stop pretending not to see it. The anchor paused. What happens next? Elijah didn't blink. We build a future where no one has to be a soldier for their family to survive a traffic stop. Meanwhile, deep inside Police HQ, Officer Jacobs sat alone in his holding cell. The cuffs were tight, the walls bare, and his name no longer protected. From the hallway, angry shouts could be heard, other inmates learning what he'd done. He closed his eyes. The sound of Elijah's voice from that press conference echoed in his head. She was 74 years old. She walked with a cane. She smiled at everyone, and you feared her because of the color of her skin. Jacobs pressed his palms to his ears. He couldn't block it out. Not anymore. Back on the streets. 1 week later. Mama Martha's funeral was approaching. The city planned a massive memorial. But the most unexpected part? Thousands had RSVP'd. People from across the country. Military veterans, faith leaders, civil rights figures, families who'd lost loved ones the same way. And in a quiet corner of town, a little boy held a handmade sign that read, "My grandma is still alive. Thank you, Mr. Elijah." The image went viral overnight, and suddenly the conversation had changed. The sky was overcast, the kind that made the world feel quiet, but inside the Civic Center, there was nothing silent about what was happening. Thousands of people had gathered. Soldiers stood in uniform, mothers clutched photos of sons and daughters, men who had never cried before wiped their eyes in public. At the front of the auditorium was a simple wooden casket, draped in white linen with a single wreath of lilies on top. A photo of Mama Martha stood tall beside it, smiling, wearing the same church hat she wore every Sunday, rain or shine. Elijah stood near the casket, wearing his formal uniform, chest heavy with medals, but he wasn't there as a soldier. He was there as a son. 10:20 a.m., the eulogy. The room fell completely still as Elijah stepped up to the podium. He looked out over the crowd, black, white, old, young, military, civilian, all gathered not because they knew her, but because they knew what had been done to her. My mother was never a threat, Elijah began, voice strong but tender. She didn't carry a weapon. She carried love, food, stories, lessons. He took a breath. She survived segregation. She outlived Jim Crow. She raised 2 sons on a maid's salary. And after all that, she died on a sidewalk because someone saw her skin before they saw her soul. The crowd sat frozen. She didn't want revenge. She wanted peace. But justice must speak louder than violence. He paused. So we're going to build something. In her name. The aftermath begins. In the weeks following the funeral, Elijah launched the Collins Foundation, focused on legal defense for families affected by police brutality and training for officers in bias de-escalation, led by veterans of every race. Donations poured in from all over the world. People volunteered. Churches opened their doors. But even more stunning, Shreveport Police Department was completely restructured. The police chief resigned in disgrace. Internal Affairs recommended the disbanding of the precinct involved. New leadership was brought in. Officers were required to wear active body cams with no shut-off feature. And as for Officer Jacobs, trial day, federal court. He stood in court, pale and shaking. Gone was the badge, the authority, the confidence. When the prosecutor played the footage, Mama Martha slowly pulling out her receipt while holding her cane, a visible wave of disgust moved through the courtroom. Jacob's defense tried to argue stress, confusion, fear, but it fell apart the moment Elijah was called to testify. Dressed in uniform, he walked to the stand. "Did you ever teach your men to shoot an unarmed old woman?" "No," Elijah answered calmly. "Then what does your training teach when you feel fear?" Elijah didn't hesitate. That you don't shoot what you don't understand. You pause, you assess, and you remember that fear is not an excuse for murder. The jury took just 2 hours, guilty on all counts. National shift. 6 months later, Mama Martha's story became part of school curriculums across multiple states. A Netflix documentary was in production. The phrase "she just had groceries" became a symbol used in murals and protest signs across the country. And more importantly, laws changed. Congress passed the Elderly Civilian Protection Act, requiring special protocols for law enforcement when dealing with seniors. Officers were required to take quarterly de-escalation training, and nationwide, more precincts adopted the pause before force rule. 1 year later, dedication ceremony. Back in Shreveport, the small park where Mama Martha was killed had been transformed. Gone were the cracked sidewalks and broken streetlights. In their place stood the Martha Collins Peace Garden, with benches, a water fountain, and a bronze statue of her holding a grocery bag in one hand and a small Bible in the other. A plaque at the base read, "She fed strangers. She raised a warrior. Her story made the world stop and think. Let her legacy remind us to see the human first." Final scene. Elijah at the garden. Elijah sat on the bench beside the statue, dressed in a simple black t-shirt and jeans. No medals, no spotlight. He watched kids play, old men play chess, women walk by with shopping bags. It was peaceful, the way Mama Martha would have wanted it. A little girl with curly hair walked up to him. "Are you the soldier whose mom turned into a statue?" Elijah smiled. "Something like that. She looks nice. My grandma says she was brave." "She was," Elijah said softly. "Braver than anyone I ever served with." The girl ran off. And for the first time since the day everything fell apart, Elijah felt something return to his chest. A full breath. Not revenge, not relief, but peace.